A very good afternoon to you, and thanks for joining us the way you always do every Monday at about this time on independent television. My name is Evan Sunokogie. The program is Africa Discourse, and we look at issues on the continent of Africa, how we stand the opportunity to gain from the rest of the world, and of course things that we need to do as a continent so that we can have our nations well developed, and also other parts of the world we get to know what Africa is known for. That's what we do here on the program African Discourse. A very good afternoon to you. Well, today on the program Africa Discourse, we are going to be looking at our own president at the African Union Summit. We understand that on Saturday the president left for Nairobi, that's the capital of Kenya, whereby the fifth mid-year term African AU Summit was held. And we're told that the president attended the fifth mid-year coordination meeting of African Union leaders in Nairobi, the Kenyan president. This meeting also included the regional economic communities, and of course also we're told that the regional mechanism and the African Union member states, which is the ROMS. The chairperson of the ECOWAS, that's the president now, is the Nigerian president, and joined by other heads of governments of foreign ministries of other nations, whereby at the meeting the president presented a report on the status of regional integration in ECOWAS, also highlighted actions carried out during the period under review by ECOWAS state. And also too, we understand that this will help to deepen regional integration, and also how countries within these economic regions will benefit. So what we're going to be looking at today is we're going to be looking at AU, African Union, what members have benefited from, and of course how this summit will also further enlighten the opportunities of nations, of member nations as it stands. Well, to do all this this afternoon, we're so privileged to have Barrister Emmanuel Obakbolo. So welcome to the program African Discourse.
Pretty good afternoon to Nigerians.
Okay. All right now. So there's a video that we have so that our viewers out there can see the president. So let's see that video footage now, whereby we'll have the president, Mr. President, arriving Kenya. That's Nairobi, the Kenyan capital. Yes, that's Mr. President now arriving at Nairobi for the fifth mid-year African Union Summit in Kenya. And of course, we're told that the president will join other heads of states and so other foreign ministries, so that issues of regional economics can be discussed. And we also understand that the theme of the fifth mid-year coordination meeting is Christian Acceleration of African Continental Free Trade Area Implementation. And also too, the aim is to bring together the Bureau of the African Union Assembly, which comprise heads of governments from Comoros, Botswana, Burundi, and Senegal, as well as the heads of 8 RECs. Now, when we talk about 8 RECs now, we're talking about the 8 economic communities, 8 regional economic communities in Africa. And of course, they are the ECOWAS, which our own president is the chairman. We also have the East African Community, that's the EAC. And we also have the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, that's the IGAD. The Common Markets for Eastern and Southern Africa, that's the COMENSA. And also we have the Southern African Development Community, that's the SADC. We also have the Community of Saharan States, that's the CENSAD, as well as we have the Arab Maghreb Union, that's the UMA, and we have the Economic Community of Central African States, that's the ECCAS. All these are the regional economic communities that make up the continent of Africa. So you see that this AU summit is probably the umbrella body that comprise all these 8 regional economic communities, and they're going to be discussing how member states can move forward economically. Yeah, Barrister, you're welcome one more time. Now, so we just saw Mr. President at the AU summit. Now, let's take a dive back now and saw how Mr. President started. You know, he came up last week, you know, adopting him as the recent chairman of ECOWAS. And he said a whole lot about how he really intends to, you know, maybe put Nigeria now in a better pedestal now as it relates to other ECOWAS nations, economically and all that. Now, what is your reactions looking at our own president as the chairman of ECOWAS now, in addition to this recent summit that Mr. President, you know, was also part of in Kenya?
Well, first and foremost, African Union, AU, is a continental body or organization. And African Union is made up of about 54 to 56 countries. I think 2 new countries were integrated or inaugurated into the African Union as it stands just now. But then, if we want to look at the overall continental situation of Africa, what do we say? Do we give Africa a pass mark? It's a germane question that needed an urgent answer. Then 2, if you look at the regional bodies, like the ECOWAS, which our president just now is the chairperson or chairman, as the case may be, of ECOWAS. You also want to ask the same question as applied or applicable to AU as a continental body, to ECOWAS as a regional body. Now, if you go back to memory lane, you look at Africa under the military rule, you would want to agree with me absolutely that under the military rule, as led by Nigeria, ECOWAS was far better than as it is just now under democracy, because we saw a regional body. They came up with what they called ECOMOG, and ECOMOG was able to maintain peace all over Africa, West African
countries now,
as it were. And Nigeria was given recognition over the world. The globe gave kudos to Nigeria, credit to Nigeria for ECOMOG, the piloting of ECOMOG. We saw top generals from the Nigerian army or the Nigerian military that were able to ensure that peace became paramount in West Africa, as it were. Now, let's come back to the situation or the plight of West Africans and Nigerians just now in particular, and generally Africa, with regards to security. I saw the president discuss. The president is canvassing or admonishing for peace and unity, and that without peace and unity, there could be no progress and development. But when you look at what is really causing the insecurity in Africa and in West Africa as it is just now, those are questions that some of our leaders have not been able to give answers to. And what happens to the strength, prowess of the military, particularly the Nigerian military, that just now it has not been able to subdue or surmount the threat of insecurity by non-state actors? You begin to ask all of these questions, and you discover that there are so many questions begging for answers and without answers. So when you now look at it, for the president to canvass for unity and for unity, peace and unity, beautiful, pretty good, that without peace and unity, indeed, there cannot be progress and development. But then, there are other questions that many of the African leaders have refused to answer. Now, where an election that brings a person into power, and that election is marred with or surrounded or garnished with a lot of fraud, to the extent that the question of legitimacy becomes an issue and is hanging on the neck of those who gain or who gets to that political seat and now get political power to control and bring everybody under the whims and caprices. You begin to discover that until these questions are answered, then the issue of peace and unity. That's why I think, to my mind, that most African leaders will only come beautiful speeches. African leaders are good at reading beautiful speeches, not written by them anyway. Their aides are the ones that always look for good lexis and structures, good grammatical languages to garnish.
We shouldn't bother about that.
No,
anyway.
to garnish. It's a speech that he made.
Yeah.
We have not seen the action. And that is the issue. Because when you make good speeches and it's not backed by action, of what essence is your speech?
Okay, now you see that this summit, what was really the focal point has to do with economies of member states of the AU, that's the African Union. And a lot of persons have also asked the issue of Sudan never came up. You know, Sudan is one nation a lot of persons have asked, what is AU doing? How are they going to make sure that the crisis in Sudan stops and all that? Nobody's talking about that. That issue was not mentioned in Kenya. But let's look at the regional economics now. The regional economic community states, member state now. We saw them a while ago, about 8 of them, of which ECOWAS is among them. Now, one major problem now that seems to stare member states, members of this regional economic community states now, organizations now, is how to really bring the economies of various nations, how to improve on the economies of various nations. Let's start from there.
Yeah, when you talk of improving the economies of various nations, the economy or economies cannot be improved where there is no progress and development. Progress and development is all about the improvement of economics. And that is what they dwelt on. And now, if you want to consider the issue of progress, development equals to economies, good economies, vibrant economies, tenable economies, strong economies, then would you, just with a wave of the hand, remove the issue of insecurity? The answer is a capital no. So that is why when you talk of development, you can talk of economic enhancement, developing Africa economics, developing various states, because in the international communities, they are known as states. Developing various states to have a strong, vibrant economy. Then, as a matter of fact, you must first consider the security stand of that nation or state, as the case may be. So, all of these, have they been able to take care of them? That is one. Two, on the other side of it, when there is a question of legitimacy, how we get to power. For instance, now take Burkina Faso, Mali. There are issues of legitimacy in all of these questions, not left behind, our own nation, Nigeria. So, when you begin to consider all of these factors, how would you, in an ideal situation where these questions have not been answered, now talk of peace, progress, and vibrant economies? It is not just possible. It's like pouring water into the basket, to my mind. And that is why we are saying, first, for you to African economy to be developed, then there must be first a free, fair, and credible elections in Africa. If you look at the international communities outside Africa,
the Western
for instance,
world now,
like Europe, you discover that their elections are not issues. They are not, because they do it. You cannot get half 100%, but you cannot be perfect, but you can near perfect. So they are near perfection, so to speak. But in our case, the question or the answer is otherwise. And that is why, until all of this is dealt with, that's why in my introduction, I did say that African leaders are good at presenting good speeches. But some of those germane issues that they know that are begging for answers, they will tactically and politically dodge them. They don't want to mention them. Then if you fail, as a matter of fact, to deal with those germane issues, how do you arrive at, like they said, progress, development, and vibrant economy? How do you arrive at that? So until all of these questions begging for answers are dealt with, African leaders, with all due respect to them, they should stop pretending, giving the international community an impression, because those persons know them. Those persons know what is happening in Africa. So now giving them an impression that all is well, where indeed none is well, is something so terrible, is something like one of the security agent of aides, rather, of the U.S. president, Joe Biden, said it is...
The former U.S. president now.
No, the president.
The recent one now.
Yes,
yeah.
Joe Biden, he said it is a terrible mistake. African leaders, in the words of that man, I want to borrow his language now, should stop making terrible mistakes. What they should do, as a matter of fact, they should put off a straight face and deal with issues the way they are. Okay. Like, for instance, now, in Nigeria now, we have some persons who have been detained for question, for crime best known to those in power. And some persons are asking other questions. For instance, like me, I'm asking, if you can arrest Emefiele, why can't you also arrest Jega? Mahmoud.
Anyway,
so, but I know the media wouldn't want us to begin to delve into all that, because they say, oh, he's in the court. Okay, let the court deal with it.
Let's talk about the issue of free trade zone area now, because it was also an issue that came up at the summit. Now, this has also been an issue with the ECOWAS. Even the chairman of the ECOWAS now, our own president, also mentioned that one of the targets of his administration as the chairman of ECOWAS is to ensure that there's actually, free trade zone market process. In other words, that all member states of ECOWAS can actually enjoy what is a free trade, zone area and all that. Now, even in this summit, it came up too. Now, do you think there has been an issue as it relates to the economies of member states of AU? I mean, that they've not been enjoying the free trade zone, thing?
How can one enjoy a free trade opportunity so created when, as a matter of fact, or where, as a matter of fact, you cannot travel to another state? For instance, can I travel to Sudan just now? Can I? To go and do business? Can I travel to Burkina Faso to go and do business, particularly the capital Ouagadougou? Can I travel to Mali to go and do business as it is? Can I even, as a Nigerian, travel to Ghana, our neighbor here? Can I? Can I travel to Benin Republic here with the closure of border to do business? So that is why we say, you don't tell the world something else.
Oh, you can travel to Benin. You can go to Benin if you want to do business.
To do business.
If you have your ECOWAS passport, you can do that.
Can I import foreign rice from Benin to Nigeria without taking through the crooked ways, the cunning ways? Can I? The answer is a no. So it is not just reading good speeches. That is what we are saying. It is more than reading good speeches. I wish African leaders will take actions first before coming to make their speeches, or read their speeches rather. I wish so. We Africans will be the one that would say, these our leaders are okay. We'll give our leaders a turn. But as it is now, country like Sudan is boiling. There's no pretense about that. Burkina Faso is a no-go area. Mali, DRC is a no-go area. So what are we talking about? Even Ethiopia.
Even parts of Senegal.
It's a no-go area. Yeah. And we are talking of free trade zone amongst African states. What do you call that? To my mind, I don't have any other word for it but to say the leaders are only what? Pretending. Because there are issues in Africa. Let me tell you, Mr. Evans, the Almighty God and Mother Nature blessed Africa.
Okay. Now,
Africa ought to be the fancy of the whole world. But where are we today?
Now, no doubt that there are issues in Africa. Some of the issues are also somehow politically motivated, like what is happening in the DRC, what is happening in Sudan. what is happening in Senegal, you know, what is also happening in parts of Mali and all that. All these are politically motivated issues. But let's look at one thing that seems to have been a problem in Africa, the issue of insecurity. Take, for example, in Nigeria. Our own insecurity in Nigeria seems to be external. I mean, a lot of persons have actually said that we really don't have internal security, as it were. The internal security we have is motivated by external factors and all that. And if you tend to spread that, to extend that, it's also a continental thing. It spreads through the whole of continent of Africa. Now, what is it that Africa has not done that needs to be probably done as it relates to insecurity in Africa? Because this is, it's bringing our economy down by the day.
Yes, I think Nigeria has, Africa has found herself in the situation as properly described by Christopher Okigbo in his poem titled Hooray for Thunder. In Africa now, we are now hooray for thunder. We are all running around. You are seated here just now. The next minute, you don't know where you are going to run to. That is the situation. Yet, yes, we can say that Africa, Nigeria's insecurity situation is not an internal one, it's an external one. Then what has our political leaders done about it? We keep hearing some persons will tell us, oh, these persons who come to do this havoc, insecurity havoc, are from so and so and so and so. We will hear another group, we post a denier that no, it is not true. It is not so and so and so. It is not ABC. It is not XYZ. It is another name they will give to him, another toga, so to speak, to paint a different scenario. Until we begin to address issues, give them their proper name, address them the way they are, we will not go anywhere. And that is why today we shy away from the chloroquine bitter truths and begin to tell and give an impression to the international community that look, our problem is not internal, our problem is external. Then, internally, what have we done? If in the first leave of it, we cannot secure ourselves internally, we are not crying aloud that it is an external factor that is causing the insecurity in Nigeria, as it were. Then, what have we done? The borders were made to understand we are short since the tenure of former President Muhammadu Buhari. What is the essence of border closure? If you close the border and yet insecurity increases, then what is happening? The militaries will have a catalog of military generals who have been changed and replaced as service chiefs. Yet, there is no improvement. Only for them to come to tell us, oh, you see, it's an external factor. Once upon a time, Nigeria brought peace in Sierra Leone. Nigeria promoted peace in Liberia. Nigeria has gone to Congo. Are you getting me? So, if all of this, if Nigeria was able to secure herself under the military reign, and also secure other parts of West Africa and Africa, as it were, what is now happening under democracy, that we cannot secure Nigeria and Nigerians and their properties, and we are talking of regional or continental security. I don't think that is possible, because you cannot give what you don't have. So until our leaders, we know that the insecurity situation in Nigeria is politically motivated, but the question is by who? Does the commander-in-chief have the political and willpower?
Let us be mindful with the way we say that now, that the insecurity in Nigeria is politically motivated. There are various ways to probably
that is the report.
But there are various ways that some analysts have also given as various factors. Some will tell you that it's actually related to who owns the land syndrome. I mean, between the farmers and the herders. That's one narrative. Why some other narrative will have that it's politically motivated. Now, this seems to be a major thing all across the African nations. You go to Senegal, it's also related somehow. Take, for example, you go to the DRC, that's the Democratic Republic of Congo now, where the civil unrest there is a kind of is an expression of what happened in Rwanda, you know, spanning into the DRC and all that. All these things have to do with who owns the land syndrome. So if we have that as an issue in Africa, what should we do? How do we come to solutions?
The question is, before now that the question of who owns the land syndrome is now ringing bell, as the case may be, how were they living before now? The togetherness. They talked about unity. Can you separate togetherness from unity?
No way.
Unity is the springboard of togetherness is the springboard of unity and peace. Now, if that is the situation, how have we been living together before now? Now, what happened that we can no longer live together as neighbors, as friends, as relations, as relatives, as the case may be? What happened? Who caused what happened? These are some of the questions. So, until we begin to address all of these issues, and I discovered that most African leaders don't want to address issues like that. Instead, at the close of the day, they will still want to look for political solutions to the situation. Then if you are looking for political solutions to the situation, it goes to tell that it was politically motivated. Because the answer to the question is political. Then, if the answer to the question is political, it is politically motivated. Okay. And African leaders should learn how to do it quick. Because we must secure Nigeria. We must secure West Africa. And we must secure Africa. And after all of this is done, then we cannot talk of peace, progress, unity, development, and vibrant economy. Okay. And I wish Africa to have a vibrant economy, because the indices naturally are there to help us have vibrant economy.
The factors are there.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So the program is still Africa Discourse on independent television, and we are looking at the president. That's President Bola TINUBU at the AU summit in Nairobi, the capital of Kenya, recently. Now we understand that the AU summit is actually this one down now. We're talking about now is the 5th edition of the summit, and also other regional economies are also going to be meeting there, whereby we'll have 8 of them. When we return, we are going to be looking at some other economic issues now as it really relates to Africa, because there's a whole lot of implications, you know, when we talk about economies in African states, and not too encouraging, a whole lot of implications as we speak now. It is even one of the factors that is responsible for the major brain drain that we see from countries in Africa, because Africans, they just find out that they don't have economic viability in their nations anymore. And of course, they leave the shores of Africa to Western world in search of greener pastures. We're going to be talking about all of that when we return on the other side of time. Please stay tuned. All right, thank you one more time. The program is still Africa Discourse on independent television, and we'll see how Barrister Emmanuel Obakbolo here with us. We are looking at the AU summit in Nairobi, the Kenyan president. Now, you saw the major headlines on our time just some few seconds ago, whereby African leaders have resolved that for African states to have economic, prowess, economic development now, there must be some level of integration. Economic integration, that's the word. So the big question once again is, how do we integrate economically? Back to you, Barrister Emmanuel Obakbolo. Now, it's very, very laughable.
You know, the speeches written by the aides of the various African leaders are pretty good ones. And the leaders just come. In some cases, they don't even understand some of those speeches, but they have the prowess, so to speak, to read those speeches. Now, when you talk of integration, African heads of states are already in Nairobi, Kenya. for African Union Summit. How many members make up AU? 1. 2, is it all the members that are in this summit? 3, those who are absent at the summit, for what reason or purpose? 4, most of the countries who are at the summit, are they indeed projecting regionalism or supremacy or superiority of individual states above the collective responsibilities of Africa? These are questions. How do you integrate the whole of Africa where some countries are at war? You have not addressed those issues. Why is part of Africa boiling? What do we do to ameliorate or remedy the situations in those countries that are boiling? And you are talking of integration. To my mind, that simply amounts to putting the cart before the horse. So, African leaders should sit down and first tell themselves the truth. What do we really want? Do we assemble at every African summit just like somebody going for a tourist, going for sightseeing of an area? Is that what they are going to do? Or perhaps they go to one of the best 5-star hotels in some of these countries. Is that what we enjoy? Or the allowances that are attached to risk traveling from your jurisdiction to another? African leaders should sit down and ask themselves the question. Do we really have Africans, the people of Africa, at heart while going for this summit? What would be the results of this summit after the summit?
Now, we know.
So these are questions.
Yeah, we know. What we are trying to look at now is what are the major steps that African leaders should take now? Because this summit is probably, we've not had this kind of summit before. It's annually, you know, this is the 5th summit and all that in this series of summit now. Now, what steps, you know, are they looking at now in trying to integrate economically? What are the steps do you think that should be considered? You have said, no doubt that you have said that the first thing they need to do is to ensure that there is civil rest in member states and all that. Outside that, what other steps do you think they should be looking at?
The issue of corruption. Corruption is another issue. Even the so-called tribal, ethnic, civil unrest we have in some part of Africa, like Congo DR, just now, Rwanda in yesteryears, was caused by even some of the leaders. Because by the time you don't preach oneness to your people, you preach division amongst your people, you have caused problem. So, African leaders should come back home, sit down, and think of how to find traditional solutions to the crises we have in Africa.
National integration.
Yes, traditional solutions to bring in. If you look at the Asian tigers we talk of today, China, Japan, Korea, North Korea, they jettisoned the Western way of development and adopted their own. The problem we have in Africa is that we like to abandon our own style of life and adopt the Western style. And even the one we adopt is the one that the Westerners have abandoned. Today, even the Westerners want to be like Africa. With all due respect to them. But here we are, also wanting to be like them. And by so doing...
They want to be like Africa because of our resources?
Yes, because our style. Our style, our tradition. If you look at our traditions are 70% in consonant with the holy books,
okay,
so to speak.
Now, let's look at the economic viability now. You know, a while ago, I said that there's a major problem in Africa now, most especially in West Africa, where this issue of brain drain is very, very alarming. A lot of West Africans, they leave the shores of West Africa, they go to the Western world, they go to other parts of Africa in search of greener pasture. Let's look at other nations of Africa that seems to be stable economically now. Take, for example, you talked about Rwanda a while ago, which is almost the dream place of most Africans now. Now, what do you think Rwanda as a country is doing that seems to have positioned them well economically now, that other nations in Africa need to also do? What are the things?
If you look at the president of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, he's a man that his people love. And the path which is piloting Rwanda just now is on the path of progress. You see development in Rwanda. One, there is peace in Rwanda. Two, there is security in Rwanda. Three, there is development in Rwanda. The question now is why and how. The leader took steps. And what are these steps? One, he ensured that he made all Rwandans, there should be justice, fairness, and equity. When these three factors are on ground and glaring, things will take shape. But in a situation where a leader emerges and you find out that the leader, by his body language and even actions, projects ethnicity, projects religion as against others, there will be problem. Before you know, even those who have something in mind to give, to develop the nation, they'll keep it to themselves. That is one side of it. Like in Nigeria today, we are talking of brain drain in Nigeria. Why? Because the experts, the professionals are not well treated. The politicians take almost everything, if not everything. So if you have the wit or the weight to fight into political office, then the sky is your starting point in Nigeria. But when you do not have it, then this crash will be where you continue to struggle. And as such, the persons are now saying, okay, let's go somewhere and look for greener pasture. And you see, the Western world, to tell you that they don't have the plan for Africa to develop, they embrace those brains and use the brains the way they like to develop their own. I was watching a documentary. After that, I now went to read about that documentary that I watched. How a Nigerian developed an app. After he developed it, he now also developed a drone. And the drone just now is what America is using.
Of course, no doubt. Nigeria, we have a lot of Nigerians outside, you know, the shows.
The political situation does not give room or is not friendly for such persons to come here and develop it here.
Okay. Now let's look at.
For instance, sir, let me not forget that line of thought.
Yeah.
The innocent motives in Nigeria. How has the government of Nigeria encouraged him? Today we are made to understand countries like Ghana, Benin are patronizing innocent motive. Why here in Nigeria they are not? Just now we heard of some persons, political office holders, trying to get bulletproof cars from elsewhere. And you say you are talking of development. How do you get that development? How do you get that strength, that economic vibrancy? How is that possible? When at the end of the day you budget about 105 billion to go and buy bulletproof vehicles somewhere, and you say you are causing development. Well, it's probably the situation today over in Nigeria and in most African states is described like the piece written by, is it Oswald Michali, Building the Nation. Building the Nation. The permanent secretary and his driver went to a conference or seminar, as the case may be. Before they got there, the permanent secretary took a glass of coffee, took some pieces of bread and tea and other things. On the way, he got ice cream, and he never gave any to the driver. Yeah. And when they got to the seminar, after the seminar, then he went to the hotel room to sleep. The driver slept in the car. Then on the morrow, the next day, why the driver picked him and they were going back to where they came from, he now told the driver, both of us are building the nation. So between these two, who is building the nation?
Note that the fifth mid-year cooperation meeting, that's what is happening in AU now, is what is happening with the AU in Kenya. It's actually also bringing together the 8 regional economic community states, that we talked about a while ago. There are 8 of them. You have the ECOWAS, and of course we have the East African Community, that's the EAC. We also have the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, that's the IGAD. We have the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, that's the COMESA. And we also have the Southern Africa Development Community, the SADC, where we have the Community of Saharan States. And just as we also have the Arab Union, that's the UMA now. And we have the Economic Community of Central African States, that's the ECCAS, about 8 of them. Now, Barrister, 8 of these regional economies states now, they are all good enough. Most countries in Africa are divided, are shared into these regional economies states now. Now, what do you think these regional economic states should learn from each other? Take, for example, the ECOWAS. Is there anything that ECOWAS and its members should learn from the East African Community, that's the EAC, vice versa? What are the things they should learn so that Africa economy, as it were, can really move forward?
I don't know what they stand to share that will promote development. Because first and foremost, if you look at the African setting generally, and you now consider the regional part of it, before now, states like South Africa, once upon a time, was a dream of Africa at a point.
It is still, probably, it is still.
For me, I don't see it any longer. In fact, the bride of African dream just now is Rwanda.
It's Rwanda, no more South Africa.
No, it's Rwanda. Okay. And everything goes back to the leadership. If you call Rwanda, the next name that will be mentioned is Paul Kagame. If you call Paul Kagame,
but do you think with what is happening in Rwanda, is it really a leadership thing or a followership thing? Because I understand that every Rwandese sees his or herself as a Rwandese. They don't see that you are from North Rwanda, you are from South Rwanda.
Is that not what I said? That is the first factor.
So that's followership, not leadership.
Then too, the policies of government. There are policies that even if you want to cause development in your area, you may not have the opportunity to do it. There are policies like that. Where the policy is so harsh and the policy does not give room for development, how do you develop? So it still goes back to the leadership. The 8 regional
economic
organizations you just mentioned now.
Yeah.
If you look at them, what do they have to offer? It's more than just going to a summit and give speeches. It's more than that. In their own backyard, what have they developed?
How are they affected?
Yes, their own.
Yeah.
So can you give what you don't have? Look, until we sit down and begin to tell ourselves the truth, like I did say, we will not go anywhere. Africa is fertile for development. It's a fertile ground for development. But with these skirmishes of crisis we are having here and there cannot be development.
Now, Nigeria seems to be very central to Africa in so many ways now. When Bola Ahmed TINUBU emerged as the chairman of ECOWAS, once again, Africa as a continent beamed the searchlights on Nigeria, and yet Nigeria is going through a whole lot as a nation. Now, what should we do as a nation so that it won't be that at the end of the day, the much expectation that most Africa countries, get expecting from us, we don't disappoint other African nations.
We have disappointed African nations for a very long time. Most African nations were looking at Nigeria, particularly during the 90s, even 80s, where Nigeria go to other countries to ensure that there is peace and progress. Do you know the amount of billions of dollars Nigeria spent in Sierra Leone and Liberia? Billions of naira. Billions of dollars, as the case may be. And Nigeria ensured that there is peace. You talked of just now that every Rwandan see themselves as such.
Yeah.
But in Nigeria, do every Nigerian see himself or herself as such?
Is that a leadership problem or
It
a followership
is,
problem?
because when the leadership is sectional, when the leadership is biased, where there is no justice, fairness, and equity, what do you anticipate? How can you anticipate progress, development, strong economy, where injustice reigns supreme? How can you anticipate that? In some part of Nigeria today, we have persons, brains, that can develop Nigeria. If you want to talk of automobile,
yeah,
we have places like that. I just mentioned Innocent. How have we encouraged him? But we saw in Nigeria, private individual built a refinery and was inaugurated months ago without a drop of fuel. Do you call that development? So these are issues. At the end of the day, you also gave license to that individual to start importing fuel, when of course there is a refinery. How do you marry that? If you subject all of this to reasonability, what will be the outcome? So we have a lot of issues. We have political favoritism, we have ethnic favoritism, we have ethnic bias, we have a trailer load of crisis that is confronting us on the face. And here we are, not be able to tell ourselves the truth. So, until all of that are dealt with, I do not think we'll go anywhere.
Anyway, Africa will go somewhere. That's the reason why we always bring you this program every Monday at about this time, so that we begin to talk about the issues and also understand the issues and see how we can contribute as, Africans in all these issues. Well, I want to say a very big thank you to Barrister Emmanuel Bakpolo for finding time to come on the show today, and also to also let us know that we really don't have another continent except this one. So the summit is still on. I think the president is going to be returning today. So let's see how other things will come up you know, as all the deliberations have been put together now. So let's see how the resolutions at the summit will affect member states of African Union. Once again, I want to say a very big thank you, Manuel, for finding time to come on the show today. All right, so on to the same time next week on this television. My name is Evan Sunokoge. Thank you, and goodbye.